Nadra stood outside the private dining room, her hand frozen on the doorknob. Inside, she could hear laughter, the kind men share over expensive whiskey when they think no one important is listening. "Hyung, serious question," one of the voices said. She recognized it as Min Jae, her husband's oldest friend. "What would you actually do if your wife just left one day?" The room went quiet. Nadra's heart stopped. She had only come to drop off the documents Sung-hyun had forgotten, the ones he needed for tomorrow's meeting. She did this often, these small things he never asked for, but always needed. If my wife left tomorrow, life would go on. Sung-hyun's voice was calm, almost bored, like he was discussing the weather or the stock market. The other men laughed. Someone clapped. Another voice said, "Cold as always, our boss." Nadra didn't move, couldn't move. The folder in her hand suddenly felt like it weighed nothing. Everything. Too much. 3 years. 3 years of waking up in a house that never felt like home, of learning to make his tea exactly how he liked it, of sitting at dinner tables where silence was the main course. 3 years of loving a man who just said her absence would change nothing. She set the folder down on the hallway table, very carefully, very quietly. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. She walked back down the corridor, past the bowing staff who knew her by name, past the golden decorations that screamed wealth in a language she'd learned to speak but never felt fluent in. In her car, she sat in the darkness of the parking garage and stared at nothing. A tear slid down her face, then another. She didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall. By the time she got home, the tears had stopped. She walked into their bedroom, the one they technically shared but where he rarely slept. Her wedding ring caught the light, the massive diamond she'd never wanted but wore anyway because it was expected. Nadra pulled it off. It slid easily, too easily. Had she lost weight? She probably had. She set it on his nightstand, right where he'd see it. Then she started packing. Let me take you back to how this all began, because every ending starts somewhere, right? 3 years ago, Nadra had been finishing her graduate degree in international business. Seoul had been exciting, challenging, and overwhelming in the best ways. She'd come from East Africa with dreams bigger than her scholarship fund, and determination that made up for every moment of homesickness. She'd met Sung-hyun at a charity auction. Ironic, really. She'd been there with her professor, watching rich people throw money at art they'd never look at twice. He'd been there because his grandfather had insisted, back when the old man was still trying to shape his cold grandson into something resembling human. Their eyes had met across the room. That was the only romantic part of their entire relationship, that one moment where Nadra's breath had caught and she'd thought, oh. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, all sharp lines and controlled power. When he'd walked over and introduced himself, his voice had been deep and careful, like he measured every word before spending it. 2 weeks later, his grandfather had invited her to tea. The old man had kind eyes and hands that shook slightly as he poured. They'd talked about everything, nothing, life. He'd asked about her family, her dreams, what she wanted to build in this world. A month after that, Sung-hyun had proposed. No romance, no pretense. His grandfather was dying and had one final wish, to see his grandson married to someone who might teach him that life was more than power and control. "I won't lie to you," Sung-hyun had said, standing in her tiny apartment that smelled like the candles she burned to remind herself of home. "This is a business arrangement. My grandfather wants to see me settled before he dies. I can offer you security, citizenship if you want it, and connections that will help your career. In return, you wear my ring and play the part when necessary." Nadra should have said no. Every reasonable cell in her brain had screamed it. But she'd looked at this beautiful broken man and thought maybe she could be the one to make him smile for real. Stupid. So stupid. Before we continue, do me a favor. If you're loving this story so far, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me if you've ever loved someone who didn't. See ya. Let's talk about it. The wedding had been huge, expensive, and cold. Hundreds of guests she didn't know, all watching the foreign girl marry into one of Seoul's most powerful families. She'd worn white, he'd worn black, and they'd both worn masks of polite contentment. Their wedding night, he'd gone to his study. She'd cried in a bathtub that could fit 5 people, surrounded by marble and gold and loneliness. The next 3 years had been a study in invisible living. Nadra had learned quickly what was expected. Show up at important events, smile, speak when spoken to, and stay out of the way. She'd thrown herself into building her consulting business, using the connections that came with the co-name to create something that was entirely hers. She'd also learned to love him in secret, in the quiet ways he'd never notice. His favorite tea appearing at his desk, his meetings organized in the color-coded system he preferred but never asked for. The household staff rotated so he never had to interact with anyone he found annoying. Fresh flowers in his study, the kind without strong scents, because they gave him headaches. Small things. Invisible things. Things that apparently meant nothing because life would go on without them, without her. Now, standing in their massive closet, Nadra pulled out a suitcase. Not the designer ones he'd bought her, but the old battered one she'd brought from home. She packed simply. Clothes, documents, the few photos she had of her family. She left behind all the jewelry, the designer bags, the expensive shoes that pinched her feet. She left behind everything that was his and took only what had always been hers. It was 2 a.m. when she finished. The house was quiet. Seung-hyun wouldn't be home until dawn, if he came home at all. He often slept at his office after these dinners. Nadra walked through the rooms one last time. The kitchen where she'd learned to make Korean dishes from the ajumma, who pitied her enough to teach her. The living room where they'd sat in silence during the handful of evenings he'd been home. The study where she'd once found him asleep at his desk and covered him with a blanket, only for him to not mention it the next day. 3 years of her life in this beautiful, empty place. She called a taxi, not a driver. Drivers talked. By morning, she needed to be somewhere he wouldn't think to look. As the city lights blurred past the taxi window, Nadra felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not anymore. Something lighter. Freer. She'd rented a small apartment 2 months ago, right after a particularly bad charity gala, where a woman had loudly wondered why Seung-hyun had married that African girl when he could have had anyone. He'd been standing right there and said nothing, done nothing, his face a mask of indifference. That night, Nadra had started planning. The apartment was in Hongdae, loud and young, and nothing like the quiet luxury she was leaving behind. It was perfect. The next morning, Seung-hyun came home at 6. He did this sometimes, stopping by to shower and change before heading back to whatever business required his attention. The house felt the same as always. Quiet, clean, organized. He showered, letting the hot water wake him up properly. The dinner had run late, and Min-jae had drunk too much and gotten philosophical about marriage. Seung-hyun barely remembered the conversation. They all blurred together after a while. He dressed in fresh clothes that had appeared in his closet, pressed and ready. He didn't think about who did that. It just happened. Like the tea that appeared. Like the household that ran smoothly. It wasn't until he was leaving that he saw it. The ring on his nightstand, catching the early morning light. Seung-hyun stopped, stared, picked it up. The metal was warm, like it had been worn recently. He turned it over in his fingers. This circle of platinum and diamonds that had cost more than most people earned in a year. He'd chosen it because the jeweler said it was appropriate for someone of his status. He'd never asked Nadra if she liked it. He didn't panic. Seung-hyun didn't panic. Panic was inefficient. He called her phone. It rang once, then went to a message saying the number was no longer in service. Odd. He tried again. Same result. He went to find Mrs. Song, the head housekeeper. She was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, but her eyes were red. "Where is she?" he asked. Mrs. Song's hands trembled as she set down the knife. "Sir, I don't know. Her closet. Some of her things are gone. Not the expensive things, the personal ones." Seung-hyun felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Still not panic. Confusion, maybe. "When did she leave?" "I don't know, sir. She was here yesterday afternoon. I heard her come in around 10 at night, but I didn't see her this morning." He nodded slowly. "If she contacts you, tell me immediately." Mrs. Song looked like she wanted to say something, but she just nodded. Seung-hyun went to work. What else was there to do? Nadra was upset about something, clearly. She'd cool off and come back. Women did this, didn't they? Dramatic exits to make a point. She'd be back by evening, probably with shopping bags and a passive-aggressive comment about his schedule. But evening came, and the house was still empty. Her phone was still disconnected. None of the drivers had taken her anywhere. Security footage showed her leaving in a taxi at 2:14 in the morning with one suitcase. "Sir, should we trace the taxi?" his head of security asked. Seung-hyun almost said yes, then stopped. If Nadra wanted space, chasing her down immediately would only make her more upset. Better to give her a few days. She'd realize how silly this was and come home. Day 2, the house felt weird. He couldn't pinpoint why. Everything looked the same. But his morning tea wasn't right. The staff seemed jumpy. His schedule was a mess, because apparently Nadra had been the one quietly managing the household calendar and coordinating with his assistant. He hadn't known that. Why had he not known that? Day 3, Min-jae visited the office. "Hey, I need Nadra's opinion on something. My sister is planning a charity event, and your wife had those great ideas last time." "She's away," Seung-hyun said, not looking up from his papers. "Oh, when will she be back?" "Soon." But he didn't know if that was true. Day 5, his grandfather's old nurse came to the house. Ms. Park had worked for the family for 40 years and was one of the few people who scared Seung-hyun, though he'd never admit it. She walked into his study without knocking, looked at him with those sharp eyes, and said, "You look like a man who lost his home and is too stupid to notice. Nadra is fine. She just needed space. For 5 days, with no contact? That's not needing space, boy. That's leaving." The word hit harder than it should have. Leaving. Not coming back. Gone. "She'll return," he said, but his voice sounded uncertain even to himself. Ms. Park shook her head. "That girl spent 3 years making this house run, making your life easier, asking for nothing. And you didn't notice. Now she's gone and you still don't see it. I provided everything she needed. Everything but the one thing that mattered." Ms. Park moved to the door, then paused. "Your grandfather chose her specifically. Did you ever wonder why?" He had, actually. He said she was kind. He said she was the only person strong enough to love you without losing herself. Looks like he was half right. She was strong enough to love you, but she was also smart enough to leave before you destroyed her. After she left, Seung-hyun sat in silence. The house was too quiet. It had always been quiet, but now the silence felt heavy, pressing. He got up and walked to Nadra's closet. Mrs. Song was right. The expensive dresses were still there, the shoes, the accessories. But the worn sweater she always curled up in was gone. The books by her bedside were gone. The photos she'd kept on her dresser, gone. She'd taken herself and left behind everything he'd given her. For the first time in 5 days, Seung-hyun felt something that might have been fear. What if she didn't come back? What if life didn't just go on? He returned to his study and opened his laptop. If Nadra wanted to disappear, fine. But he had resources, people, connections. Finding one woman in Seoul would be easy, except it wasn't. She'd closed their joint bank account, he discovered. He'd never checked it before. Why would he? He'd set it up, put money in monthly, assumed she used it for whatever she needed. But when his accountant pulled the records, Seung-hyun went very still. She'd never touched his money. Not once in 3 years. Every expense had come from a separate account under her name alone. The joint account had accumulated hundreds of thousands, while she'd funded her entire life independently. "Sir, should I trace where her personal funds came from?" the accountant asked nervously. "Do it." The report came back in an hour. Nadra ran a consulting firm specializing in international business relations. She had clients across 3 continents. Her income rivaled his legitimate business earnings. His wife, the woman he'd married out of obligation, was successful in her own right. And he'd never known. Never asked. Never cared to find out. Seung-hyun stood at the window of his office, looking out at Seoul's sprawling lights. Somewhere out there, Nadra was living a life he knew nothing about. Working with people he'd never met. Dreaming dreams she'd never shared, because he'd never asked. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, Mr. Kang is here for your 7 o'clock. He'd forgotten. Another meeting. Another deal. Another piece of the empire he'd built. The empire that suddenly felt hollow. "Cancel it," he said. "Sir? Cancel all my meetings for tomorrow. I need to find my wife." His assistant was quiet for a moment. "Of course, sir." "Sir, if I may?" "What?" Mrs. Ko came by the office sometimes. She was always very kind. "I hope you find her." Everyone seemed to know Nadra except him. His own wife was a stranger he lived with, a ghost who'd made his life work without him noticing. Seung-hyun picked up the wedding ring from his desk, where he'd been carrying it. Such a small thing. Such a massive failure. He'd said life would go on. He'd been wrong. Nadra's new apartment was tiny compared to the house. 1 bedroom, a kitchen she could cross in 6 steps, a living room that barely fit a couch. The bathroom didn't have a tub, just a shower that sputtered when the pressure was low. She loved it. The first morning, she woke up on a mattress on the floor because her furniture hadn't arrived yet. Sunlight streamed through the window, bringing noise from the street below. Students laughing, music from a cafe, life happening loudly and without apology. She made coffee in the cheap pot she'd bought from the convenience store and sat by the window. No one needed her to be anywhere. No silent breakfast across from a husband who read his phone like she didn't exist. No schedule to maintain, no image to uphold. Just her, and the terrible coffee, and the messy, beautiful noise of the city. Her phone buzzed, the new one she'd bought, with a new number only 3 people had. It was Jennifer, her best friend from grad school who now lived in Singapore. "Girl, please tell me you actually did it." Nadra smiled. "I did it." Jennifer screamed so loud Nadra had to pull the phone away from her ear. "I'm so proud of you. How do you feel?" "Terrified. Free. Like I might throw up or laugh or both." "That's perfect. That's exactly right. What's the plan?" Nadra looked around her empty apartment. "Build something new. I have enough clients to work remote. I can take on more projects. The international ones I kept turning down because they required travel, and I thought I should be available. Available for a man who didn't notice you were there? It hurt because it was true. Yeah, that was stupid. Not stupid. Hopeful. But hope without reciprocation is just self-destruction in a pretty dress. You're doing the right thing." After they hung up, Nadra opened her laptop. Emails flooded in, work requests, follow-ups, opportunities. She'd been good at her job while playing the invisible wife. Now she could be great at it while just being herself. She accepted a consulting contract with a company in Berlin. 3 months, good pay, the kind of challenge that made her pulse quicken. The kind she'd always wanted but never pursued, because what if Seong-yeon needed her home? He'd never needed her home. He probably hadn't noticed the nights she was there versus the nights she worked late. The thought should have hurt more, but it was starting to feel like relief. Meanwhile, across the city, Seong-hyun was discovering just how invisible his wife had been, while somehow holding his entire world together. "What do you mean the park deal is falling apart?" he asked his business manager. Mrs. Ko usually handled the relationship aspect. Mrs. Park specifically requested her presence at meetings. Without her, they're reconsidering the partnership. "My wife attended business meetings?" His manager looked confused. "Yes, sir. You approved it last year. She's been consulting on all our international expansions. Her insights have been invaluable." Seong-hyun felt like he'd stepped into an alternate reality. "Show me the files." What he saw made his chest tight. Nadra's fingerprints were everywhere in his business. Not in obvious ways, but in the margins, the details, the relationships. She'd been building bridges while he'd been focused on the bottom line. Client after client mentioned her specifically in their communications, praised her understanding, her cultural sensitivity, her intelligence. She'd been working alongside him for years, and he'd thought she was just attending events as his accessory. "Get me everything," he said quietly. Every project she touched, every client she spoke with, every contribution she made. The report took 2 days to compile. When it arrived, Seong-hyun read it alone in his study, the same study where Nadra had probably worked on these same projects, while he ignored her presence. She'd saved 3 major deals from collapsing. She'd opened doors in markets he'd been trying to crack for years. She'd turned hostile business rivals into allies through sheer diplomatic skill. And she'd done it all while the sole elite whispered that she was an opportunistic foreigner who'd trapped him into marriage. He found social media posts, old ones from events they'd attended. In every photo, he stood rigid and cold, while Nadra smiled warmly at whoever she was speaking with. The comments were brutal. Why did he even marry her? She's pretty, but so out of place. Probably a green card situation. I heard his grandfather forced it. That last one was partially true, which somehow made it worse. Seong-hyun kept scrolling and found a video from a charity gala 8 months ago. Someone had recorded Nadra speaking with a group of international investors, switching effortlessly between English, Korean, and what he now knew was Swahili. She was animated, laughing, brilliant. The camera panned and caught him in the background, stone-faced and separate. They looked like strangers. They had been strangers. The comments on this video were different. She's too good for him. Imagine being that smart and beautiful and married to a wall. I'd treat her better in 1 day than he does in a year. Seong-yeon closed the laptop. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. When had he become this person? When had he decided that being untouchable meant being inhuman? He knew when. After his parents died, after his grandfather had tried to hold together a broken boy who decided feeling nothing was safer than feeling everything. He'd built walls so high nothing could hurt him. He just hadn't realized Nadra had been trapped outside them the whole time. His phone rang. Min-jae. "You find her yet?" "No. It's been a week, Hyung. That's not a fight. That's an escape." Seong-hyun said nothing. Min-jae's voice softened. "What happened? Did you two argue?" "No. We never argued. We barely spoke." "Then why did she leave?" Seong-hyun remembered the dinner, the question, his answer. "I think I said something. I don't know if she heard. But the timing matches." "What did you say?" He didn't want to repeat it. The words felt poisonous now. That if she left, life would go on. The silence on the other end was damning. Hyung, please tell me you didn't actually say that. I did. And she heard? I think so. Min-jae exhaled slowly. You're an idiot. A complete idiot. That woman has been in love with you since day one and everyone could see it except you. She married me for practical reasons. Maybe it started that way. But I've seen how she looks at you. How she lights up when you enter a room even though you never look at her. How she knows your schedule better than your assistant. How she makes sure you eat. How she covers for you when you're rude at events. Min-jae paused. She loved you. Past tense. Because I don't know if anyone comes back from hearing that they're disposable. The word hit like a bullet. Disposable. Had he made her feel disposable? Yes. The answer was obviously yes. How do I fix this? Seung-hyun asked. I don't know if you can. But you better figure it out fast. Because word is spreading. People are asking where she is. Important people. And they're not asking you. They're asking each other. Which means you've already lost the narrative. After the call ended, Seung-hyun did something he hadn't done in years. He went to see his grandfather's grave. The cemetery was quiet. His grandfather's headstone was simple despite the family's wealth. The old man had hated ostentation, said it was insecurity dressed in gold. Seung-hyun sat on the bench nearby. You'd be disappointed in me. You knew this would happen, didn't you? That I'd destroy the one good thing you tried to give me. The wind rustled through the trees. I found your letter. The one you left with Ms. Park. You said Nadra was strong enough to love me, but smart enough to not lose herself. You were betting she could do both. He laughed bitterly. She chose herself. I think you'd be proud of her for that. He stayed until the sun set, talking to a man who couldn't answer, but whose wisdom he'd ignored when it mattered. While Seung-hyun sat with ghosts, Nadra was having dinner with living, laughing people. Her old study group had reunited at a Korean barbecue place in Hongdae. There were 5 of them, all international students who'd stayed in Seoul after graduation. Okay, but seriously, you just left? Marcus, who was from Brazil, looked impressed and terrified. You left the Ko Seung-hyun. I left my husband who happened to be Ko Seung-hyun, Nadra corrected, grilling meat with the skill she'd learned from Mrs. Song. There's a difference. Is there though? Yuki from Japan leaned in. Girl, he's like rich and scary. Isn't he in like organized crime or something? Or something, Nadra said vaguely. She'd never confirmed or denied the rumors about Seung-hyun's business. Partly because she didn't know the full truth, partly because what was the point? But that doesn't mean I had to stay somewhere I wasn't valued. Listen, I need to know something. Drop a comment right now telling me what you would do in Nadra's situation. Would you leave, or would you stay and fight for the marriage? And while you're down there, subscribe to the channel because this story is about to get so much more complicated. I'm just saying, if my husband looked like that, and had that much money, I'd need a really good reason to leave, Marcus said. Nadra looked at him steadily. He said my absence wouldn't matter, that life would go on without me. Is that good enough? The table went silent. Yuki grabbed her hand. That's not a good enough reason. That's the only reason. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. I'm not. And she meant it. The ache was still there, probably would be for a while, but it was the ache of healing, not festering. The conversation moved on to lighter topics. They laughed about their terrible grad school apartments, the professors who'd seemed so intimidating then, the dreams they'd had. Some had come true, some had changed, all had evolved. So what's next for you? Yuki asked as they walked out into the night air. Berlin. 3-month contract starting next month. Berlin? That's amazing. Wait, can you leave the country? Like, legally? Nadra smiled. I have my own citizenship. I had it before the marriage. I never needed his name for that, even though everyone assumed I did. People assume a lot about you, huh? They do. But that's their problem now, not mine. She meant it. For 3 years, she'd tried to prove herself to people who'd already decided she wasn't worth knowing. The foreign girl who'd married up. The outsider who didn't belong. The gold digger who'd trapped a confirmed bachelor. Never mind that Seong-hyun had proposed. Never mind that she'd brought her own money, her own education, her own worth. Never mind that she'd loved him honestly while asking for nothing but basic human recognition. None of that mattered to people who needed her to be small so they could feel big. She was done being small. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Nadra met with clients, finalized her Berlin contract, and slowly furnished her apartment. She bought things she actually liked instead of what matched some designer's vision. Bright throw pillows, art from local markets, plants she'd probably forget to water but wanted anyway. She cut her hair, not dramatically, just enough to feel different. Lighter. She started taking a dance class, something she'd wanted to do for years but never had time for. Turned out she was terrible at it, which made it even more fun. She lived loudly in her quiet apartment and felt more at home than she had in a mansion. Seong-hyun, meanwhile, was unraveling carefully maintained threads. He'd called in his most trusted people and asked a simple question. Did anyone deliberately keep me and my wife apart? The room had gone very quiet. His right-hand man, Do-hyun, finally spoke. Sir, some of us were concerned that a close marriage might affect your judgment. Your grandfather had gone soft in his final years. We couldn't afford that vulnerability. Who decided this? 3 men raised their hands. 3 men he'd trusted for over a decade. You manipulated my marriage. We protected your position, Do-hyun corrected. A man in love is a man with weaknesses. Your enemies would have exploited that. Seong-hyun stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, which everyone in the room knew was more dangerous than yelling. You're fired. All 3 of you. You have 1 hour to clear your offices. Sir, you can't be serious. We've been loyal for years. You've been insubordinate for years, and I was too blind to see it. Loyalty means trusting my decisions, not overruling them behind my back. Get out. They tried to argue, but security escorted them out. The remaining people in the room looked nervous. Anyone else been making decisions about my personal life? Seong-hyun asked. Silence. Good. Then let me be clear. My marriage fell apart because of my failures, not anyone else's. But if I find out anyone else has been interfering, you'll follow them. Understood? Nods all around. After they left, Seong-hyun sat alone. Firing those 3 felt good in the moment, but changed nothing about the core problem. He'd been a terrible husband. Whatever they'd done, he'd allowed through his own indifference. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He almost deleted it, then saw the preview. You're looking for the wrong person. She was never lost. You just never looked. He called the number. It rang once, then disconnected. But he knew who it was. Ms. Park, his grandfather's nurse, the woman who'd helped raise him. She was right. He'd been searching for Nadra like she was missing, like she needed to be found. But she wasn't lost. She'd walked away with open eyes and clear purpose. He was the one lost. He'd been lost for years, maybe his whole life. Building an empire while forgetting to build a life. Protecting himself from pain so thoroughly, he'd locked out everything else too. The question wasn't how to find Nadra. It was whether he deserved a chance to know the woman he'd married 3 years ago and ignored every day since. His assistant knocked softly. Sir, the Lee Corporation meeting is in 10 minutes. Cancel it. Sir, cancel everything today. And tomorrow. I need to think. For the first time in his professional life, Seong-hyun put business second. He went home to the empty house and walked through it like a stranger. In Nadra's abandoned closet, he found something he'd missed before. A journal tucked behind designer shoeboxes. He hesitated. Reading it was an invasion of privacy. But she'd left it here, maybe on purpose. He opened to a random page. Day 412 of being married to a man who doesn't know my favorite color. It's yellow. Bright, happy yellow, like the sun I miss from home. Everything in this house is white or black or gray. I bought yellow flowers for my room, and the decorator removed them because they didn't match the aesthetic. I didn't fight it. I'm tired of fighting for space in a home that will never be mine. Seung-hyun closed his eyes. Day 412, over a year into their marriage, and she'd been counting days, like a prisoner marking time. He flipped to another page. He came home early today. I was so surprised I dropped the teacup I was holding. It shattered everywhere. He asked if I was okay, and I said yes, and he nodded and went to his study. I cleaned up the glass and thought about how that's our marriage. Me breaking quietly, and him asking if I'm okay without actually wanting to know the answer. Another page. Mrs. Song asked me today if I'm happy. I lied and said yes. She didn't believe me. I saw it in her eyes. But what else could I say? That I'm living in a beautiful cage with a beautiful husband who treats me like expensive furniture? That some days I forget the sound of my own laughter? That I miss being seen so badly it physically hurts? He couldn't read anymore. Every page was evidence of his cruelty through indifference. She'd been drowning, and he'd been standing on the shore, not even aware there was water. Seung-hyun took the journal to his study. On his desk was a photo from their wedding. They looked perfect, picture ready, completely hollow. He'd thought that was enough. Look the part, play the role, keep everything surface level and safe. His grandfather had tried to warn him. That girl has a light in her. Don't let this family's darkness put it out. He'd done exactly that. Slowly, day by day, he'd dimmed her until she'd had to leave to remember how to shine. The house phone rang. Mrs. Song answered, then came to find him. "Sir, it's Mrs. Park from the Lee family. She's asking about Nadra's attendance at next month's charity gala. What should I tell her?" "Tell her my wife won't be available." Mrs. Song hesitated. "Sir, people are starting to ask questions. What should we say?" What should they say? The truth. That he'd been such a poor excuse for a husband that his wife had literally vanished in the night rather than spend one more day invisible. Tell them she's traveling for business. It wasn't technically a lie. Nadra probably was working. She had a whole career he'd known nothing about. After Mrs. Song left, Seung-hyun pulled up Nadra's consulting firm website. There she was on the About page, professional and polished. Her bio listed accomplishments that impressed him, credentials he hadn't known she had, client testimonials that glowed. Ms. Bakari's cultural insight transformed our entire Asian market approach. Working with Nadra was the best decision our company made. She doesn't just bridge cultural gaps. She builds actual relationships. The woman in these testimonials was confident, valued, appreciated. Nothing like the quiet ghost who'd moved through his house. Same woman, different contexts. In one, she was celebrated. In the other, she'd been tolerated. He'd made her small when she was clearly capable of being huge. His phone rang. Min-jae again. "You need to see something." "What?" "Just meet me at the usual place. 20 minutes. The usual place was a quiet bar they'd been going to since university. Min-jae was already there, looking uncomfortable. "What is it?" Seung-hyun asked. Min-jae slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a social media post from someone named Marcus Silva. The photo showed a group of people at a restaurant, laughing over barbecue. In the center was Nadra, her smile so genuine it hurt to see. The caption read, "Celebrating my brilliant friend's new adventure." Berlin won't know what hit them. Berlin? She was leaving the country. When was this posted? Seung-hyun asked. 2 hours ago. It's public. Half of Seoul's expat community has already seen it. Which meant soon everyone would know. His wife hadn't just left him. She was leaving Korea entirely. There's more, Min-jae said quietly. He scrolled to the comments. Nadra, you deserve all the happiness. Finally choosing yourself. We love to see it. Some people don't know what they have until it's gone. That last comment had 60 likes. Seung-hyun sat back. The walls he'd built so carefully were crumbling. His marriage was public knowledge as a failure. His wife was thriving without him. And he was sitting in a bar, holding a wedding ring that had been rejected, trying to figure out how he'd become the villain in his own love story. What do I do? He asked. Min-jae looked at him seriously. Do you love her? I don't know. I don't know what that feels like. Then figure it out. Fast. Because once she gets on that plane, she's not coming back. Why would she? You gave her nothing to come back to. The words were harsh, but true. Seung-hyun had offered Nadra security, status, financial comfort. Everything except the one thing that actually mattered. He'd never offered her his heart because he'd convinced himself he didn't have one to give. Turned out he did. It just hadn't started beating properly until she'd left and taken the rhythm with her. Seung-hyun spent the next 3 days doing something completely foreign to him. He tried to understand his own feelings. It wasn't going well. He'd built a life around not feeling, around making decisions based on logic and profit and strategy. Emotions were messy. They made people weak. His father had loved his mother, and when she died in the same accident that took him, his grandfather had been destroyed by the double loss. Love was vulnerability, and vulnerability was danger. Except Nadra had loved him, and it hadn't made her weak. It had made her strong enough to leave. He was in his study, surrounded by papers he wasn't reading, when Ms. Park arrived unannounced. She had a key. His grandfather had given it to her decades ago, and Seung-hyun had never taken it back. You look terrible, she said. Good evening to you too. She sat down across from him without being invited. I'm going to tell you something your grandfather made me promise not to reveal unless absolutely necessary. I think we're there. Seung-hyun looked up. He knew you'd be a terrible husband. That's why he chose Nadra specifically. I don't understand. Ms. Park leaned forward. Your grandfather interviewed 20 potential brides for you, all from good families, all appropriate. He rejected them all. Then he met Nadra at that charity auction, the same one you attended. He watched her for an hour. Watched how she talked to the waitstaff like equals, how she laughed without covering her mouth, how she was completely herself in a room full of people pretending. He arranged for us to meet. He did. And then he got very sick very fast. Seung-hyun went still. He was sick for months. He was sick for over a year. He hid it. Moved up his timeline because he knew you needed Nadra sooner rather than later. The marriage clause in his will, the urgency, all of it was manufactured to push you into doing something you'd never do on your own. He manipulated me. He saved you. Or tried to. He knew you'd keep choosing loneliness because it felt safe. He gave you someone who would love you anyway, and hoped that eventually you'd wake up. Ms. Park stood. But he also told Nadra the truth before the wedding. Told her exactly what she was getting into. That you were broken and cold, and might never love her back. He gave her an out. She chose to stay, and try anyway. After Ms. Park left, Seung-hyun sat in the dark. Nadra had known. From day one, she'd known he was emotionally unavailable, and she'd married him anyway. She'd spent 3 years trying to reach someone who'd built walls specifically to keep her out. And he'd had the audacity to think she was the one benefiting from their arrangement. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. "Sir, you asked to be informed of any mentions of your wife. There's a video circulating. You should see this." The link led to a social media video. Someone had recorded a panel discussion at a business conference. The title was "Breaking into International Markets." Nadra was one of 5 speakers. She wore a bright yellow dress. The color hit him hard. Her favorite color that he'd never known, never asked. "The biggest mistake companies make," Nadra was saying, "is assuming international expansion is just about translating your existing approach. It's not. It's about actually respecting that different cultures have different values, communication styles, relationship expectations. You can't fake that respect. People can tell." Someone in the audience asked a question. "How do you handle situations where you're not initially respected because of your background?" Nadra smiled, and it was sad and knowing. "You prove them wrong, quietly. You do excellent work. You build real relationships. You let your results speak. And if after all that they still don't see your value, you leave. Because staying somewhere you're not valued doesn't prove your worth, it diminishes it." The audience applauded. The video ended. Seong-hyun watched it 3 more times. She was talking about business, but he heard the subtext. She'd tried to prove her worth to him quietly for 3 years, and when he still didn't see it, she'd left. The math was simple. Painful, but simple. He needed to see her. Needed to talk to her face to face. But she'd made herself impossible to find. And he was starting to understand. That was intentional. She didn't want to be found by him. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Song knocked on his study door late one evening. "Sir, I know I shouldn't interfere, but Nadra was kind to me. She learned Korean from me. She asked about my children. She treated me like a person." Mrs. Song twisted her hands. "She's my friend. And I think she made a mistake." "What mistake?" "Leaving you. I know it's not my place, but I saw how she looked at you. She loves you. Maybe if you talk to her." "I would talk to her if I could find her." Mrs. Song bit her lip. "I might know where she is. She needed a reference for her new apartment lease. I'm listed as her emergency contact." Hope flared sharp and painful. "Where?" Mrs. Song gave him the address. Then she said, "Sir, please don't hurt her again. I'll lose my job for this, I know. But if you're just going to break her heart a second time, leave her alone." "You won't lose your job, and I don't want to hurt her. I want to understand her." Understanding is a good start, but she needs more than that. Seong-hyun drove to Hongdae himself. The neighborhood was nothing like where they'd lived. It was young, loud, chaotic. Students everywhere, street food vendors, music pouring from open doors. He couldn't imagine Nadra here, except he could. The Nadra from the video, bright and alive, would fit perfectly here. Her building was modest but well-maintained. He stood outside for 10 minutes trying to figure out what to say. "What did you say to the wife you'd ignored for 3 years?" "Sorry," felt inadequate. "I miss you," felt selfish. Come home felt like a demand he had no right to make. He was still standing there when she appeared. Nadra came around the corner carrying groceries, laughing at something on her phone. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down, no makeup. She looked younger, happier. She looked up and saw him. All the happiness drained from her face. They stared at each other across the evening crowd. People flowed around them like water around stones. "How did you find me?" she asked finally. "Mrs. Song, don't be angry with her." "I'm not." Nadra shifted her grocery bags. "What do you want?" What did he want? Everything. Nothing. A chance to start over. A time machine to redo 3 years. "To talk," he said. "We never talked in 3 years of marriage. Why start now?" "Because I was wrong. About everything." Nadra laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You were wrong. Okay, apology noted. Anything else? This wasn't going how he'd imagined, though he wasn't sure what he'd expected. For her to cry and forgive him, to throw herself into his arms. She'd spent 3 years getting nothing from him. Why would she give him anything now? Can we go somewhere private? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. No. Whatever you need to say it here. Fine. He could do this publicly. He'd humiliated her privately for years. Turnabout was fair. I read your journal, the one you left behind. Her eyes went wide, then angry. You had no right. I know. I'm sorry. But Nadra, I had no idea you were that unhappy. You had no idea about anything involving me. That was the problem. She started to walk past him. He caught her arm gently. She froze, looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. Please, he said. The word felt foreign in his mouth. He never begged. Please just give me 5 minutes. Nadra pulled her arm free but didn't walk away. 5 minutes. Then I'm done. They sat on a bench near the playground across the street. Kids were playing on the swings. Normal families doing normal things. Everything Seung-hyun had never thought he wanted. I told you before we married that I couldn't promise you love, he started. I remember. I thought I was being honest, fair. But I wasn't fair. I was cruel. I made you live in a house where you were a guest. I took everything you did for granted. I never asked about your life, your work, your dreams. I treated you like you were invisible. Nadra said nothing. And when you left, I thought you were being dramatic, that you'd come back in a few days. I didn't understand that you weren't leaving to make a point. You were leaving to survive. You're right, she said quietly. I was dying in that house. Slowly. Every day, a little more. Every dinner, in silence. Every event where you'd stand 3 feet away like I had a disease. Every time someone asked if we were happy and I had to lie. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you just sorry that I left? Because those are different things. The question hit hard. Was he sorry he'd hurt her? Or just sorry he was alone now? Before he could answer, his phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Answer it, Nadra said. Some things never change. He almost didn't. Then he saw it was Do-hyun, one of the men he'd fired. Strange. What? He answered. Sir, you need to be careful. Choi's people know about your wife. They're planning something. Choi, his main rival in the organization, someone who'd been waiting years for Seung-hyun to show weakness. What are they planning? I don't know exactly. But they know she left you. They know where she lives. Sir, I know you fired me, but I'm telling you, move her somewhere safe. Tonight. The call ended. Seung-hyun's blood went cold. He looked at Nadra, who was watching him with guarded eyes. You need to come with me right now, he said. Excuse me? It's not safe here. There are people who might try to use you to get to me. Nadra stood up. That's not my problem anymore. I'm not your wife in anything but paperwork. Your enemies are your business. Nadra, please. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right. But you're in danger because of me. Let me fix that at least. She started to argue when a car pulled up to the curb. 3 men got out. Seung-hyun recognized them immediately. Choi's people. He moved in front of Nadra. Get behind me. What's happening? Just stay close. The lead man smiled. Mr. Ko, funny seeing you here. And this must be the wife we've heard so much about. The one who left you. Walk away, Seung-hyun said quietly. This doesn't involve her. But it does. See, Choi wants to discuss some territory disputes. And he thought having a conversation with your wife first might make you more agreeable. They moved forward. Seung-hyun calculated quickly. 3 of them, 1 of him, and he needed to protect Nadra. Not good odds. Then Nadra did something unexpected. She stepped forward and spoke in rapid Korean. You know what's funny? I was just telling my husband that his problems aren't my problems anymore. But now you've made this my problem. And I really hate being interrupted during my grocery shopping. The men looked confused. This wasn't the scared reaction they'd expected. Nadra continued. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back in that car. You're going to tell Choi that threatening foreign nationals brings international attention he doesn't want. And if you don't, I'm going to make one phone call to my friend at the embassy, who's been looking for a reason to investigate organized crime connections in Hongdae. She pulled out her phone. Your choice. Make it fast. All right, pause for a second. Hit that subscribe button right now because you need to see how this ends. And drop a comment telling me if you think Nadra should take him back or not. Now let's see what happens next. The men looked at each other. The lead one spoke into a phone in low tones. Then he nodded at his companions. Choi says we'll be in touch through proper channels, he said to Seong-hyun. They got back in the car and drove away. The second they were gone, Nadra's hand started shaking. Seong-hyun caught them in his. That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave, he said. I was bluffing. I don't have a friend at the embassy. They didn't know that. He looked at her seriously. But this proves my point. You're not safe alone. I've been alone for 3 years. I've been fine. You were protected for 3 years because you were my wife. Now everyone knows you left. That makes you a target or a tool, depending on who's looking. Nadra pulled her hands away. So what? I'm supposed to come back and play the dutiful wife for my own protection? Live in a cage for security? No. I don't know. I just know I can't leave you here. She looked at him, really looked at him. You want to know what's sad? This is the most I've felt like you actually see me in our entire marriage, and it took someone threatening me for it to happen. The words cut deep because they were true. Come back to the house, just for tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out better security for your apartment. We'll hire people. Whatever you need to stay safe while staying separate. You mean that? I can stay here, live my life, and you'll just arrange security? Yes. Nadra studied his face. What changed? Why do you suddenly care? I've always cared. I was just too much of a coward to admit it felt like anything more than obligation. And now? Now. What was different now? He'd spent days trying to name the feeling, the emptiness without her. The way the house felt wrong, the way he kept turning to tell her things and finding silence. Now I realized that when I said life would go on without you, I was lying. It goes on. But it's not life, it's just existence. Nadra's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. That's a nice thing to say. You've gotten good at nice things to say. But I lived through 3 years of your actions. Words are cheap. Then let me prove it through actions, starting with keeping you safe. She picked up her grocery bags. Fine. 1 night. But I'm sleeping in a guest room with a locked door. And tomorrow, we're lawyers to discuss divorce. The word hit him like a punch. Divorce. That's what people do when marriages don't work. They end them officially instead of just existing in limbo. She walked toward his car. He followed, feeling like the ground was crumbling under his feet. He'd found her. She was coming with him. And she was planning to legally end the marriage he'd only just realized he wanted to save. The drive back was silent. Nadra stared out the window at the city passing by. Seong-hyun kept glancing at her, trying to memorize her profile. When had she become so essential? Or had she always been, and he was only now noticing? When they pulled up to the house, Mrs. Song was waiting. She took one look at Nadra and burst into tears. I'm so sorry. I told him where you were. I know I shouldn't have. Please don't hate me. Nadra hugged her. I could never hate you. You've been kinder to me than almost anyone in this city. Are you back? Please say you're back. Just for tonight, for safety reasons." Mrs. Song's face fell, but she nodded. "I'll prepare the guest room. I can do it myself. Please, let me. I've missed having someone to take care of who actually appreciates it." The comment was clearly directed at Seong-hyun. He let it land. While Mrs. Song fussed over Nadra, Seong-hyun made phone calls. He arranged security for her apartment, background checks on her neighbors, a security detail for when she went out. Everything he should have thought of before, but hadn't, because he'd been too busy pretending he didn't care. When he finally went upstairs, he found Nadra in the guest room, sitting on the bed in borrowed pajamas. She looked tiny in the big room. "Security is arranged," he said from the doorway. 24/7 coverage starting tomorrow." "That's excessive. It's necessary. My world is dangerous. You were protected by proximity before. Now you need active protection." "For how long?" "Until Choi and I settle our territory dispute. Could be weeks, could be months." Nadra laughed tiredly. "So I escape one prison and end up in another." "You're not a prisoner. You can go anywhere, do anything. You'll just have professional security with you. That's not freedom." He knew that. But what choice did they have? He'd brought danger into her life by marrying her. He couldn't undo that now. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. For marrying you without loving you. For wasting 3 years. For saying something so cruel you had to leave. For putting you in danger just by being associated with me." "You're sorry for marrying me?" "I'm sorry for how I married you. If I could do it again, everything would be different." "But you can't do it again. That's not how time works." She lay down, turning away from him. "Good night, Seong-hyun." It was a dismissal. He took it. In his own room, he couldn't sleep. Nadra was 30 feet away, and it felt both too close and impossibly far. He'd spent years sleeping in this house with her, and never felt this aware of her presence. Around 3 in the morning, he heard something. Crying, muffled, but unmistakable. He followed the sound to the guest room. The door was open a crack. Nadra was curled up on the bed, sobbing into the pillow. Every instinct said to go to her, but he'd lost the right to comfort her. He'd caused this pain. He went back to his room and made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd give her whatever she wanted. Divorce, freedom, security, money, anything. He'd spent 3 years taking from her. It was time to give something back. The next morning, Nadra came down to breakfast, dressed and ready to leave. Seong-hyun was already there, which surprised her. He was never home for breakfast. "I contacted my lawyer," he said. "He'll prepare whatever paperwork you want. Divorce, annulment if possible, legal separation. Your choice." Nadra sat down slowly. "Just like that?" "Just like that. I'll also transfer assets. The house in Jeju that you liked, the one we visited once. It's yours. And I'll set up an account separate from any divorce settlement, enough that you never have to work unless you want to. I don't want your money. I know, but take it anyway. Call it payment for 3 years of unpaid emotional labor." She almost smiled. Almost. "There's one condition," he added. "Of course there is. Before you sign anything, give me 30 days. 30 days for what? To prove I can be different. To show you that I'm capable of being the husband I should have been from the start." He looked at her directly. "If after 30 days you still want the divorce, I'll sign immediately. No lawyers, no fighting, no making it difficult. You'll get everything you ask for, and I'll let you go. And if I say no to your 30 days, then I'll still give you everything and let you go. But Nadra, I'm asking. Give me 1 month to try. That's all." She stared at him. "Why? Why now? You had 3 years." "Because I was asleep for 3 years. I was going through motions, building walls, protecting myself from feeling anything. And then you left, and the walls came down, and I realized I'd locked out the only person who'd ever tried to actually know me. Pretty words again. Then let me prove they're not just words. 30 days. If I fail, you lose nothing. You're already planning to leave. Nadra picked up her tea. It was made perfectly. She'd probably made it herself since he didn't know how she liked it. Except when she tasted it, it was exactly right. The correct temperature, the right amount of honey, even the hint of cinnamon she preferred. She looked at him questioningly. I called Mrs. Song at 5 in the morning and asked her to teach me, he admitted. I figured it was time I learned how my wife takes her tea. Such a small thing, such a tiny gesture. But Nadra felt it crack something in her chest. 3 years she'd made his tea. One night, and he'd learned to make hers. 30 days, she said finally. But I'm staying in the guest room, and I'm still working, still living my life. This isn't me coming back as your wife. This is me allowing you a chance to prove you've changed. Understood? And if you miss even one day, if you slip back into old patterns even once, I'm done. No second chances. Fair. She stood up. I have a client meeting at 10. Your security people won't be obvious about following me, right? They'll be invisible. Good. Because I'm not explaining to my clients why I suddenly have bodyguards. She left for her meeting. Seung-hyun sat alone at the breakfast table and realized he'd just made the biggest gamble of his life. 30 days to learn how to be a husband to a woman who already had one foot out the door. He picked up his phone and called Min-jae. I need your help. I need to learn how to date my own wife. Min-jae laughed. This should be interesting. What's the plan? I have no idea. That's why I'm calling you. Okay, first rule. Find out what she actually likes. Not what you think she should like. What she actually enjoys. Seung-hyun realized he had no idea. How do I do that? You could try this crazy thing called asking her. She won't tell me. She'll think I'm gathering information to manipulate her. Then observe. Pay attention. You're good at reading people in business. Read her. After they hung up, Seung-hyun did something he'd never done. He cleared his schedule for the entire month. His business partner nearly had a heart attack. Sir, you can't just take a month off. Watch me. Handle everything unless it's life or death. I have something more important to do. For the first time in his professional life, Seung-hyun put business second. He started small. When Nadra came home from her meeting, there were fresh flowers in her room, bright yellow sunflowers. She didn't comment on them, but he saw her smile when she thought he wasn't looking. Day 2, he asked her about her meeting. Actually asked, actually listened. She talked for 20 minutes about a complicated client situation, and he offered genuine advice. They had their first real conversation. Day 3, he came home early and asked if she wanted to have dinner together. Not a silent obligation, an actual shared meal. She said yes. They talked about her work, her plans for Berlin, what she'd been doing in the 2 weeks she'd been gone. He learned she was terrible at plants, but kept buying them. That she missed East African food, but hadn't found a good restaurant in Seoul. That she took dance classes and was hilariously bad at it, but loved it anyway. Day 5, he found an East African restaurant across the city and made reservations. When he told her, she actually teared up. You looked for this? You said you missed the food. So yes, I looked. The dinner was perfect. She ordered dishes he'd never heard of and insisted he try everything. The food was spicy and flavorful and nothing like what he usually ate. He loved watching her face light up with each bite. This tastes like home, she said softly. Thank you. 2 words, but they meant everything. Day 8, he showed up at her dance class, just to watch. She was indeed terrible, offbeat and clumsy. She was also joyful in a way he'd never seen. After class, she was embarrassed. You weren't supposed to see that. Why not? You looked happy. I looked ridiculous. You looked free. Something shifted in her eyes. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of seeing him as someone different. Day 12, they were having breakfast when Nadra said, "I'm scared." Of what? That you're doing all this just to keep me. That once the 30 days are up and I agree to stay, you'll go back to how you were. I won't. How can I trust that? You can't. Trust has to be earned, and I haven't earned it yet. But Nadra, I'm not doing this to trap you. I'm doing this because I'm finally becoming someone I should have been all along. Why though? Why now? He set down his coffee. You want the truth? I hated who I was when you left. I looked at my life and realized I'd built everything on being untouchable. No connections, no vulnerability, no love. And I thought that made me strong. But you left, and I realized it just made me alone. So I'm your redemption arc? No. You're the person who deserved better, and I'm trying to become someone who could give it to you, even if you still choose to leave. Day 15 marked the halfway point. Sung-hyun woke up to find Nadra in the kitchen making breakfast, for both of them. I figured you've been trying. I could too, she said. They ate together. The silence was comfortable now instead of suffocating. I'm scared too, he admitted. Of what? That I'll do everything right and it still won't be enough. That I hurt you too badly for too long. Nadra was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Anything. That night at the dinner, when you said life would go on without me, did you mean it? He'd known this question was coming. In that moment, yes, I meant it. Because I genuinely didn't understand what you meant to my life. I thought you were peripheral, optional. I was wrong. What changed? You left and took all the air with you. The house was empty. My life was empty. I kept turning to tell you things, and you weren't there. And I realized you'd been holding everything together, and I'd never noticed. I was so angry when I heard you say that, she whispered. It confirmed everything I'd feared. That I was just fulfilling a contract. That you'd never see me as a person. I see you now. Do you? Or do you see what you lost? The question hit deep. I see both. I see an incredible woman who's brilliant and kind and strong. And I see that I lost her through my own stupidity. Both things are true. Day 20, Nadra's Berlin contract start date arrived. She'd been avoiding thinking about it. The company called asking when she'd arrive. I need more time, she told them. There's something I need to resolve first. After she hung up, Sung-hyun asked, Are you staying because you want to, or because you feel obligated to finish the 30 days? I don't know yet. Ask me in 10 days. Day 23, Choi made his move. Not against Nadra, against Sung-hyun's business. A coordinated attack meant to destroy his shipping operations. The old Sung-hyun would have dropped everything to fight back. Instead, he delegated. Handle it, he told his team. I trust you. Nadra overheard. You're not going to personally oversee everything. I have something more important to do. What? You have that art exhibition you wanted to see. I promised I'd go with you. They went to the exhibition. They held hands. Somewhere in the past 23 days, touching had become natural again. Day 27, Nadra woke up in the guest room and realized she didn't want to be there anymore. She wanted to be in the master bedroom, with her husband. The thought terrified her. Day 28, Sung-hyun took her to the beach. The same beach where they'd spent their honeymoon pretending to be happy. Why here? She asked. Because I have a lot of bad memories to overwrite. I thought we could start here. They walked along the shore. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. 2 more days, Nadra said. I know. I haven't decided yet. I know. If I stay, Everything has to be different. Actually different. Not just nice gestures for show. I know. She stopped walking. I'm falling in love with you again. Or maybe for the first time in a real way. And it terrifies me because I don't know if this version of you is sustainable or if it's just fear of loss. Seong-hyun turned to face her. I'm falling in love with you too, probably for the first time in a real way since I didn't know how to love before. And I'm terrified because I don't know if I can be this person forever or if I'll mess it up. So we're both scared. Completely. That's not very romantic. No. But it's honest. Nadra laughed. Actually laughed. We're terrible at this. The worst. But maybe we can be terrible at it together. She kissed him. Not a dramatic movie kiss. Just a soft, tentative press of lips that felt like a beginning. Day 29, Nadra moved back into the master bedroom. She didn't announce it. Just started sleeping there. Seong-hyun came in to find her already asleep in what used to be her side of the bed. He stood there for a long moment, hardly breathing, afraid to hope. Then he got in bed next to her. She rolled over and curled into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're not alone anymore, she murmured, half asleep. Neither of us is. Day 30 arrived. Nadra woke up wrapped in her husband's arms. He was already awake, watching her. It's been 30 days, he said. I know. What's your decision? Nadra pretended to think. I'm going to need another 30 days. His face fell. Another trial period? No. Another 30 days to plan a proper wedding. Because the first one didn't count. This time, I want to marry someone who actually sees me. It took a second for the words to register. Then Seong-hyun smiled. Actually smiled. The kind of smile that transformed his whole face. You're staying? I'm staying. But we're doing this right. Dating, counseling, actually building a marriage instead of just existing in one. Anything you want. I want you to meet my family in Africa. Done. I want to go to Berlin for that contract. You can come visit, but I need to do this for me. Absolutely. I want you to go to therapy and figure out why you built those walls. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay. And I want you to tell me right now what changed. Really changed. Because I need to know this is real. Seong-hyun sat up, pulling her with him. You want the truth? I was raised to think emotions were weakness. My grandfather tried to teach me different, but I didn't listen. I built an empire, but I was dead inside. And then you left, and I realized being dead inside isn't strength. It's just death. He took her hands. You brought me back to life. Not by staying and loving me despite everything, but by leaving and showing me what I'd lost. I changed because I had to. Because going back to being that person felt impossible. That's the most you've ever said to me at once, Nadra said softly. Get used to it. I have 3 years of conversations to make up for. Before she could respond, someone knocked on the door. Mrs. Song peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, but there are people downstairs asking about wedding planning. They said someone called them. Seong-hyun looked sheepish. I might have scheduled wedding planners for today. You know, just in case you said yes. Nadra laughed. You were that confident? I was that hopeful. 6 months later, they got married again. Actually married, with real vows that they wrote themselves. Nadra wore yellow. Seong-hyun cried. Their guests included Mrs. Song, Miss Park, Min Jae, and Nadra's entire family, who'd flown in from Africa. In his vows, Seong-hyun said, I told someone once that if you left, life would go on. I was right. Life did go on. It just wasn't worth living. In her vows, Nadra said, I left you to find myself. I came back because I found us. They moved into a new house, one they chose together. Nadra kept her apartment in Hongdae for when she needed space. Seong-hyun learned to be okay with that. He went to therapy every week, She went to Berlin for 3 months, and he visited twice, letting her have her independence. They argued sometimes, real arguments where they both said how they felt. It was messy and hard, and so much better than silence. 1 year after she'd left, they were having breakfast together, actual breakfast, talking and laughing. Seung-hyun's phone rang. Business. He looked at it, then at Nadra. "They can wait," he said, silencing it. "You sure? Life goes on whether I answer that call or not. But this, us, this only happens if I choose it every single day." Nadra smiled, the real smile, the one he'd learned to recognize. "Good answer. I'm learning." "Yes, you are. So here's what I need from you before we end this story. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second chances. Drop a comment telling me what you think. Did Nadra make the right choice? And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to leave what doesn't serve you, even if you love it. Especially if you love it. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give someone a second chance. The difference is knowing which moment calls for which kind of bravery. Nadra learned when to leave. Seung-hyun learned when to fight for what mattered. Together, they learned that love isn't about perfect people. It's about imperfect people who choose each other every single day on purpose. And sometimes, just sometimes, life doesn't just go on. It gets better. It gets real. It gets messy and complicated and beautiful. It's worth living.